Updates. Time now to talk politics and developments in the West African SAP region, because the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, is deploying a stringent measure to support a credible election in the Republic of Liberia. Together with the African Union, an independent team is working with the National Electoral Commission to assess the coalition and also tallying of electoral results. This follows the heightened mistrust within Liberian society over the credibility of the National Electoral Commission. Our correspondent joining us live from Liberia is Nanaya Aljuma, who's going to be monitoring the 2023 presidential and legislative elections in Liberia. He's joining us now with more. Nanaya, thank you for spending some time with us. But first, though, it's a good time also to listen to the ECOWAS mission, which has addressed the press on what to expect in the coming days.
Society organizations, the executive, the legislature, to the judiciary. Your arrival here has been preceded by many engagements that ECOWAS Commission has had here in Liberia. We've had an exploratory mission that arrived here in February. The essence of that engagement was to assess what was going on in Liberia as we worked towards an electoral process that ensured free, fair, transparent, inclusive, credible, and peaceful elections. After they left, following their recommendations, we stepped up our engagement with national stakeholders here in Liberia to ensure that the process was on track, to identify the issues and to find ways to address these issues. Undoubtedly, we have seen some level of delays in the electoral process, and particularly with the calendar of activities. This was primarily because at the initial stages of turning from an OMR system to a BVR, the procurement process itself was fraught with challenges. However, with a lot of backdoor diplomacy, we managed to overcome that. But the ripple effect was that we had time constraints with the elections calendar. In fact, there was a point where we thought that we may not be able to hold elections on October 10th, 2023. And so for me, personally, I see it as a commendation to the National Elections Commission to striving to ensure that elections are held on the constitutionally mandated date, which is October 10th. Ladies and gentlemen, this year in particular, or this particular election, presents a peculiarity for us. I understand that in the 100-year history of Liberia, this is the first time where you are having the incumbent and the main opposition party, one having tasted power before and wanting to come back to power. Sorry. Better? Yeah, thank you. One having tasted power for 12 years and seeking to be re-elected, and of course the incumbent also seeking to be re-elected. This is the first time in 100 years of Liberia's political history. So of course the stakes are high, and because the stakes are high, it behoves us to be extra vigilant in assessing and addressing the concerns that have arisen. In the last few weeks, we have seen a growth, a spate of inflammatory rhetoric in the public space, and that has raised concerns for many of us in the international community, as well as the Liberian community itself. In order to ensure that we escalate our conversations, it was necessary for us to invite ahead Professor Jega to come and assess the situation as head of mission and to have some high-level engagement with political leaders. We believe that the engagements we held were successful. We received the reassurance of political leaders that they are committed to a peaceful electoral process. We are also keenly aware that in spite of all of the preparations that NEC has done, we have a few, NEC being the National Elections Commission, forgive me, we have a few outstanding matters that need to be attended to. And we're working round the clock to support the national efforts, complement the roles that they have played and what they've put in place so that we can have an enhanced, transparent election. There is mistrust within the rank and file of the Liberian society. Mistrust that is largely driven by political rhetoric. And even though we believe that the transparency of the process here, particularly around results management, tallying and collation, meets best practices, we nonetheless hear a lot of negativity and criticism towards the National Elections Commission. In these last few days, we have held engagements with the National Elections Commission, engaging them to step up their communication strategy to dispel rumors, reduce fear and anxiety, and enable the Liberian people understand that elections is just another democratic exercise that we need to engage in entrenching our democratic processes. Having said that, I think it's also important for us to state that elections is the business of every one of us. And so in Liberia, through the various engagements we've had on the ECOWAS, using the ECOWAS platform, we have sought to encourage that level of involvement of all. Liberia has a predominantly youthful population. Over 60% of them of the Liberian population is under 35 years old. And that can be a force for good.
By the Economic Community of West African States, the country representative Josephine Nkrumah addressing the press there. But let's cross you over now to Liberia, where Nana Aljuma is joining us for more. It's been 24 hours since your arrival. How's the euphoria like catching up among citizenry ahead of the elections, which is just days away?
So driving from the airport through to Monrovia, and this morning also going through town, things are very, very calm here in Monrovia. You don't get the sense of an election impending until you see these billboards and posters all over. That is when you understand that there's something coming up. But nonetheless, this is a very, very important election for the people here in Liberia. Many of them continue to talk about the election, especially when you monitor the local radio stations here in Liberia. Now, the issue is whether the National Electoral Commission, whether they have credible data to help ensure that the election is free and fair on Monday. And this is what the Economic Community of West African States, the election observer team, is working together with the NEC to ensure that all doubts are cleared on the minds of people. As you heard Madam Josephine Nkrumah say, already there's a team, an independent IT team on the ground to ensure that they collaborate with the National Electoral Commission to ensure that all the bottlenecks or all the challenges that the various aspirants and also the people of Liberia have with the register is sorted before Monday.
I see, and that's a crucial point to take note of. Why is the sub-regional body ECOWAS concerned about a peaceful election in Liberia? We know that this is the very first post the United Nations monitoring group and forced to stabilize peace in the country after prolonged periods of civil war. Beyond these concerns, why is ECOWAS concerned about a peaceful elections in Liberia this year?
From the ECOWAS delegation to Liberia, they are very aware of the issues that the civil war or the civil unrest that was in Liberia some time ago, and for about 15 years or more, the place have been calm. So this is the reason why the ECOWAS wants to ensure that there is continuous calmness in Liberia, and also the ECOWAS wants to deepen the democracy within Liberia. Already we understand, or we know, that there are issues with overthrow in other parts of West Africa, and this is, such issues continue to rise within the West African states. So ECOWAS wants to send a strong signal to the whole of West Africa that democracy is still the way to go. So they've taken a very, very important role in this particular election, especially with working together with the National Electoral Commission to ensure that everything that they are doing is in due course. And also they would want to ensure that the people of Liberia continue to understand that democracy is the only way to go.
Finally, there's a need for us to talk about the head of the mission doing the long-term observation of this democratic process. What reaction have you been getting from them at this news briefing earlier today?
So this morning, the observer, the whole of the observer team here in Kenya, in Liberia, to be precise, we're in a meeting, and the people have been taken through the do's and don'ts when it comes to being an observer in this election. And after that, the leadership of the observer team went to the UN office to meet with diplomats here in Liberia. They've been discussing a lot of issues. Unfortunately, the media didn't get entrance, or we didn't get access to this meeting. What we understand is that pressing issues that needed to be raised today were raised in that meeting. There was supposed to be a press conference, a joint press conference organized by the National Electoral Commission together with the ECOWAS. Unfortunately, due to some reasons, this meeting or this press conference has been postponed, but the ECOWAS continue to work closely together with the Electoral Commission here in Liberia. Things are very, very calm, and the ECOWAS team is on the grounds and ensuring that they deal with all the pending issues or the issues that have been raised by various aspirants and also the electorate.
Well, Nanaya Aljima joining us there from Liberia. He will be on the grounds to cover the 2023 Liberian election, which is just underway in a couple of days. But we now take you to Europe, because this week Germany is celebrating 33 years since its reunification, as events take place to remember the dramatic occurrences that led to the merging of the two ideologically opposed systems. A reference is often made to how German society and public life continue to be shaped by the division between East and West, and how the country's extraordinary history influences its current role on the world stage. To talk to us more about this, I'm joined by DW's Kate Ferguson in Berlin. Kate, how do Germans view this reunification today?
Speaking Germans would see reunification as a success, because if you really think about how extraordinary this was, you had two countries with radically opposed ideologies separated by a literal wall, almost overnight becoming one. And if you put it into that context, it really is a success that we have a Germany for the last 3 decades that has seen relative political and economic stability, something you can't really take for granted. That said, though, there are still divisions between East and West, particularly on an economic level. Wages in the former East Germany are significantly lower than in the West, and that has a lot to do with the brain drain that happened following reunification. There have been efforts made to address these sort of structural differences, though, and a report by the German government out this week pointed out that the pensions between East and West, there was no longer a difference between them, because that had long been a bone of contention. There are other positive developments as well. We actually saw a big investment by the American company Intel in the eastern German city of Magdeburg recently. They invested 33 billion euros into a chip-making factory there. That was one of the biggest sources of foreign investment in Germany ever, and a particularly symbolic one given Magdeburg's location and history. So I would say there is still a divide, but it is getting less.
And many are talking about Germany's current ruling coalition government facing some enormous challenges, including issues ranging from the rise in support for the far-right Alternative for German party. To what extent can we say that some of these historical divisions between the East and West are playing a major role in this trend that we're seeing?
Well, it is true that support for the far-right AfD is greater in the former East Germany than in the West. In the states of Thuringia, Saxony and Brandenburg, they are polling at about 30%, which is a real challenge for the mainstream political parties in Germany. But they are also doing quite well in the Western states. We have elections coming up in Bavaria and Hesse, both in the former West Germany this weekend. And the AfD is expected to get around 15% of the vote there. So definitely not insignificant. There are a number of factors that explain maybe why the AfD is rising at the moment. The German economy is not faring well. There are a number of reasons to explain this, but at the same time, we have seen a large rise in the number of people arriving in Germany to seek asylum. And while those two trends have nothing to do with each other, it's something that the far right often conflates. So we do have a couple of things that might be playing into the rising support there. That said, I think experts would be keen to point out that the divide between rural and urban areas is actually more significant when it comes to support for the AfD than the difference between East and West. People in rural areas are far more likely to vote for that party than their counterparts in cities.
This way, 3 decades since reunification, Germany has struggled to define its identity on the world stage. How does the country see itself in the international space today as we speak?
Well, yeah, for a long time, Germany preferred to have a little bit of a backseat role when it came to international affairs. They favoured a non-interventionist, quite a passive approach. But that has actually changed dramatically under the leadership of Chancellor Olaf Scholz. And that's a direct consequence of Russia's war in Ukraine. After that, Scholz announced what's been known as a Zeitenwende. That loosely translates as a change of epoch. And it refers to a real shift in German policy in a variety of areas when it comes to defence spending, for example, or the willingness to send heavy weapons to war zones, but also to other areas like the decision to wean itself off Russian gas and to adopt a more decisive stance in its relations to China. So I would say that 33 years after German reunification, circumstance have actually dictated that Germany is now taking a more assertive role on the world stage.
Okay, Ferguson, thank you for the latest from Berlin.